Hi, I'm Caroline. I live in London and like most of us, 2020 has forced me to stay put in my home country. Not to be thwarted in my thirst for adventure, I am determined to make the most of the beautiful nature that the UK has to offer. I spent some of the summer undertaking an epic road trip around the Scottish Highlands and Islands and documented the whole thing. Be sure to check those videos out if you haven't already. In the last episode, I took a day trip from London to the New Forest, rented a bike, and hit the trails to spot the famous New Forest wild ponies. In today's episode, I'll be undertaking another day trip away from London, this time to the National Trust's Winkworth Arboretum in Surrey. To the Winkworth Arboretum here in Surrey. We've driven down from London just because we're getting to about the central point of October and the leaves are starting to change, and this arboretum was created by a guy called Dr. Wilfred Fox, and he wanted in the original days to be able to make this area a beautiful colour palette for autumnal colours, so it seemed like the best time of year to come on down. So we'll go take a wander and see how beautiful it is at this time of year. Tree stump behind me that has been carved into mushroom looking shapes, and I think it's very apt because at this point in the arboretum we've actually got loads of mushrooms that are growing around it, and it just reminds me of one of my favourite dad jokes, which is, why did the mushroom have so many friends? Because it was a fun guy. No? Oh, okay, never mind. Under what's known as a Catsura tree at the moment, and there's two reasons why I know that it's that. One that you have to be a little bit more looking out for is the shape of the leaves. They're heart-shaped, but the thing that gave it as a dead giveaway was that as soon as we started to walk into this area, there was this overwhelming smell of candyfloss, and I know that these Catsura trees, they give off a smell of candyfloss. Even though there's no one around here making it, it's the tree that's giving off this smell. It is absolutely delicious. So in 1937, Dr. Wilfred Fox, who lived really close to this area, realised that this area of land had come up for sale. He ended up buying it with this vision of creating a beautiful arboretum, and in the early days his vision was for a blaze of autumnal colour. 5 years later his work had to stop, it was put on hold as he then joined the war effort, and his job was driving ambulances over to France. As the war was underway, the Ministry of Supplies ordered that the trees that were in this area here needed to be felled because they needed the wood for the war effort. Once those trees had been cleared from this area, it resulted in this bowl-like area, and Dr. Wilfred Fox could then have that vision and he could see exactly what he wanted to be able to plant in here. And as you can hopefully see around me, we've got these beautiful trees with all of these different autumnal colours, and we've got the oranges and the yellows, and there's even purples as well in amongst it. So whilst it seemed almost a shame that it was being ordered that the trees that were here needed to be felled, actually the ones that were here were a little bit on the boring side, and it ended up creating this really beautiful area. Lived in Hascombe, which was really close to the Arboretum, so he used to walk from here back home and vice versa, and this was the amazing view that he used to have as he was walking to and from. It's pretty spectacular. Around this arboretum, but this one is particularly spectacular. I mean, it's bigger than my hand. I'd even say it's probably bigger than my face as well, but actually looking in this meadow, you've got a few other ones that are starting to sprout up as well. I'm just really impressed that something that is that huge hasn't toppled over yet. I think a couple of other ones have, but I've never seen a mushroom this big before. As part of the planning of the Arboretum, Dr. Fox actually allowed for some of the land to remain as part of the wild woodland, which is what we're in at the moment. It wasn't designed to be appealing, particularly in any of the specific seasons. As we go a little bit further along this boardwalk, I think it'll open out to a little bit more of a wooded area. I think we're going to get into an area that is actually quite appealing in spring. So whilst in the early days, his vision was very much for a beautiful autumnal colour, later on, after the war, he then decided, actually, let's get the Arboretum popping with colour in spring. Obviously we're not here in spring at the moment, but we've come all this way, we might as well go and explore and see what else there is. Further along, we've come to an even larger boardwalk section, and it's allowing us to be able to cross a wetlands area. There's the stream that's flowing underneath, and it's actually quite surprising just how many stinging nettles there are beneath. But I think we just need to keep on wandering, because something tells me this isn't the spring section. I think the woodland or wetland section within the woodlands is something different to the spring section again. understanding is that the area just over there is in fact the bluebell wood, but of course the bluebells only come out in the spring, and by the looks of things I think the ferns have then taken over throughout the summer, and even they're starting to die back now. What's different is that this part of the Arboretum is practically dead. Barely anyone's been around this section, so it seems like if it's autumn, that autumnal area that's got all of the really beautiful different coloured trees is absolutely heaving. But if you want a little bit of solitude, just come off to the spring area when it's not spring. Behind me is the Badger's Bowl, and long after Dr. Fox had passed away in 1984 through to 1985, when the National Trust had taken over the Arboretum, they cleared that area that you can see behind me, as it was a Douglas fir plantation. And once those trees had been removed, they only planted around the periphery of it, which then leaves the beautiful grassy meadow that you can probably see. I think perhaps if we come on a summery day, we would have found a spot to lay down a picnic rug, but the grass has been incredibly dewy this morning, so I think we're gonna go back to the upper part of the Arboretum, try and find a picnic bench to then have our lunch on instead. So we found a really nice picnic bench that overlooks some beautiful trees in one of the two main bowls that are here at the Arboretum, and to me nothing says soup quite like autumn, so we made up some really nice vegetable soup before coming out here, put it in our trusty thermos flasks, and we're going to just try and warm up on this rather chilly autumn day. Coffee cups might have already been on the bench when we turned up, but we're going to do a solid. We're going to take them with us, try and find a bin to get rid of them, and then make sure that we hand sanitize immediately afterwards. Along the upper section of the Arboretum after having had lunch, sat at the top overlooking one of the bowls, and we've been walking along a path that is full of magnolia trees, and we can smell something that's really earthy, but we're not too sure what it is. And even the magnolia trees have got, I guess they must be seeds, but they almost look like flowers because they're pink and really quite pretty. And then we've come across this tree here, which obviously is a dead tree, and there's a huge crack down the middle of it, and what we can only assume must be a bee's nest inside of it, because there's hundreds of bees just coming in and out of it. Again, even though we've come for the autumnal colour, I feel like there's actually so much more that this Arboretum has to offer. After having wandered around the whole of the Arboretum, we've just come to the tea rooms at the entrance or exit of the Arboretum, just to warm up with a little bit of a coffee. One of the things about this Arboretum is that it's not privately owned, it's actually part of the National Trust, and the National Trust in this country looks after and maintains a lot of coastal land, countryside, historical old buildings, and also green spaces such as parks, gardens and arboretums such as this one. When it comes to the National Trust areas, you can pay to get into them per visit and per place that you're going to go and visit. If you are going to some of the historical old buildings, then it tends to be the more expensive ones just because of the high maintenance costs to keep those buildings in ship shape, all the way down to the sort of more wild areas that are just able to sprawl, such as coastal areas or woodlands, and they either are the cheapest or can sometimes even be free. Back in 2019, I thought that an excellent idea for a Christmas present would be to ask for us to have an annual membership, and an annual membership allows you to be able to visit almost all of their properties and parks, gardens, coastal areas and so on for free, and you also get the parking for free. And of course, back in 2019, I think like just about everyone, no one thought that this global pandemic was going to reach this point. So for a lot of this year, we've not actually been able to use our membership cards, but we get one of these that then we just show, and then it means that we don't have to pay anything. We've managed to get our parking for free, but we are obviously very aware that it is a charitable trust, and so what we tend to like to do is at the end of our visits just go to the tea room to pick up some coffee or some cake. I think it is just a little bit inflated in the price, but it's because the proceeds can then get put back into the protection of all of these areas. It's been really nice actually getting to come to one where we've not had to pay the entry price, which would have been either £10 or £10.50, I think, if you chose to include gift aid. And it's just been a really lovely day out, albeit a little bit chilly, but I think you have to put up with that slightly chilly weather if you want the beautiful autumnal colours. Whilst the colours were spectacular in the Arboretum, as October progresses, I'll be going in search of more autumnal wonders, from bright red fungi and a Japanese garden at Wakehurst, through to the beginning of the deer rutting season in London's Richmond Park. If you've not done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can join me in my autumnal adventures.